Okay, I think I finally, only 4 minutes into class, have it set up to go. Whew. So this is our Mesozoic week. Uh, we will be, well, I guess second week. It's going to be a lot of flying things. So we're going to start out with some kind of odd mammals and things like that, and then get into how do we get to birds, our living dinosaurs today. Wednesday, whatever day of the week we also have this class, is going to be pterosaurs. So these are our pterodactyls, what you probably most commonly heard of. We have an excellent cast of a skull of one of these things. They're pretty darn weird in a lot of ways. Phylogenetically, where do they fit in the history of all of the things alive that we've talked about? How they started flying. So this is going to be something we're going to start thinking about today. How do you evolve flight? This is a major innovation in life. When insects develop the ability to fly, they rule the skies for a really, really long time. And now we're going to work on changing that. There were a few things in the Triassic that might have been gliders, but we're not going to get powered flight until we start having birds and our pterosaurs. And then next week we'll get to bats, which are a whole other story of weirdness. If you have not sent me the topic you would like to do for your final project, which will be picking a geologic time period, you're going to be telling me about the tectonic setting and what the tectonic setting does to things like sea level. Are there mountain building events? Are there periods of not very many rocks forming because of not much tectonics going on? What does all of this do and connect with climate? What's our average temperatures and climate and sort of broad rough setting? I'm not looking for degrees. I'm looking for it's a hot world. It's a very cold world, ice ages, no ice on Earth, those sort of details for climate. What does this do to life? What's life like in the oceans? What's life like on land? If there is any life on land, depending on the time period you pick. What are major innovations that happen in life during that time period? Do you pick something where we have our first ever land plants? Do you pick something where we have our first ever flying vertebrates? Finally, what are sort of any special events that happen? So if there's large volcanic eruptions, if there's space rocks smashing into things, stuff like that happening. You can write an essay, or I strongly encourage you to do something else. I have a bunch of examples in my office. I was going to say I can open up one of them on my computer, but since I'm also recording on Zoom, I'm pretty sure if I open up iTunes, my computer will in fact blow up. But I have two songs that students have written of sort of varying qualities. One of them, the quality of like artistic endeavors is not the part you are graded on. If you pick one of the artistic options, you just need to write sort of about a page to kind of explain how your creative option addresses the particular points. You will have 10 sources. Soonish, send me some sources so that I can help you find more sources. If you send me your topic, I can also help you find particular sources. But I've gotten cakes, I've gotten really cool music, I've gotten a mobile, I've gotten several pieces of art that are hanging in my office that I can bring up and show. I've gotten poster boards, presentations, all sorts of, I've gotten children's books. I have a couple examples of those in my office. Lots of fun opportunities. So if you have an idea that you want to sound off of me, please do. Any questions on sort of details on this? For lab this week, we will be doing our dinosaur debates. If you have not gotten a paper, help me help you come up with a paper. I have a bunch of various options. We'll talk about some of them in class. Your assignment by Wednesday will be to have at least vaguely skimmed your paper so that you have a question for a Mesozoic expert or researcher of some form. Questions? Yay! The Mesozoic. This is frequently called our age of dinosaurs or age of reptiles. We start out with the heyday of Pangea. This is going to really set our stage for everything else. Our dominant plants during this period are going to be conifers. So this is things like fir trees and pine trees, also some slightly odder options like larches, metasequoias, our state fossil of Oregon. Dinosaurs aren't going to really start to be a thing until the late Triassic. They will take off and be very successful, our dominant groups of all of our ecosystems, for the Jurassic and the Cretaceous. Birds are actually going to show up in the Jurassic and continue to get more and more common throughout the Cretaceous. Wildly successful. Arguably, we are still in the era of dinosaurs because there are so many more birds than there are mammals today. There are also birds in every environment. We have birds who spend years out at sea, things like the albatross that occasionally land in the ocean, but mostly spend their time flying. We have birds living in Antarctica, in the interior of Antarctica, where we do not have any mammals. There are no terrestrial land mammals in Antarctica. The closest we get is things like leopard seals that'll pull out on the edge of Antarctica, whereas penguins will walk tens and tens of miles into the interior of Antarctica. There's quite a few other flying birds that spend time in Antarctica, like giant skuas and giant petrels as well. Despite the fact that the Cenozoic is going to be our age of mammals, mammals are also going to really start taking off in the Jurassic. They get sort of downplayed because dinosaurs are admittedly really cool, but we'll get into a little bit more about mammals are more interesting than we give them credit for in the Mesozoic. And then finally, maybe the biggest life invention that's going to happen in some arguments for all of the Mesozoic is we're going to get flowering plants. And this is something that, if you're a big plant fan, is another option for a paper. As a paper came out about 2 weeks ago, pushing back our earliest flowering plants much earlier into the Jurassic. So we sort of used to think we didn't have flowering plants until in the Cretaceous, flowering plants start taking off. There is some argument that maybe this led to the rise of the mammals. We have teeth that are really good at processing plants. There are many mammals that are specialized for weird different plants, and dinosaurs might not have been as good at that. I don't know. It's a possibility. Most of the time when we think of the Mesozoic, probably you've not really thought, gee, what was life in the Mesozoic like? But if you pictured something from this time period, probably the first thing that comes to mind is a dinosaur. There's actually a lot more going on. I really like this artist's reconstruction of the Cretaceous because, honestly, if you walked out into nature, this is probably more like what you would see. It's not full of a whole bunch of dinosaurs in like Mortal Kombat and every little corner crammed full of critters. It's a story about plants. We've got ferns, we've got cycads, we've got flowers that are showing up. We have some weird water plants, conifers in the distance. What kind of sense of temperature do you get from this image? Pretty darn warm. It's sort of swampy and wet. It's lush and green and very sort of tropical feeling. That's going to characterize a lot of our late Mesozoic. A hothouse Earth, as the fans turn on possessively. Our earliest mammals are admittedly maybe not the most exciting things to look at, but they're actually going to be more diverse than we've previously thought. And this is something that there's a lot of research going on in, and we've really only started to discover in the last 10, 20 years just how diverse mammals in the Mesozoic really were. This was the cover of the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology a few years ago, and possibly is currently our oldest mammal. It's a little squirrely sort of sized guy, probably eating bugs. Our tectonics are part of this really important story. At our Permian Triassic boundary, we've formed the formed Pangea, mooshed all of our continents together. During the Triassic, we're going to mostly just be sitting there and then slowly starting to rift the continents apart. This is happening, basically splitting the northern hemisphere from the lower hemisphere. We have what will become South America, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, India in this sort of southern half. In the northern half, we have a little bit more complicated as we change sea level. We have shallow seas. Things can probably get back and forth between these land masses periodically, but it's a little bit more disconnected. During the Jurassic, we continue this rifting apart of our continents. There may have been a little bit of connection, but this was also likely fairly mountainous. We have subduction going on along our Pacific coast and a fairly major desert, sort of our holdover of all of our land masses together messing with climate. The reason why this is so important is my college biology textbook started with a quote from a man named E.O. Wilson that said, "Nothing in biology makes sense without the light of evolution." That's super true. But nothing in biology also makes sense without plate tectonics. This is our eras. We are going to be evolving and starting mammals for our age of mammals, all of these important things going on. Which side you're on is going to make a huge difference over what's there, our diversity of life, effectively for the rest of time as we know it. By the time we get into the Cretaceous, our really big explosion of dinosaurs in a lot of different ways, birds are really diversifying, our flowering plants are taking off, mammals are getting more complex and more diverse. We've already separated continents a lot. And each one of these continents is effectively going to be stuck with whatever was on it in the Jurassic. What critters we have today are largely dictated by this, and later connections between some of these different groups that'll form. We also have, by the time we get into our Cretaceous, and especially this later Cretaceous, really warm climate. There is no ice on the planet in the Cretaceous, especially by the late Cretaceous. This means that sea level is about 200 meters higher than it is today. We're underwater. 80% of the global world population today would be underwater in Cretaceous hothouse climate, no ice on Earth, higher sea levels. We have things like the end Cretaceous inland seaway of the Americas. Europe is a whole lot of islands. A lot of it is quite underwater. We have sort of flooding into the back of the Amazonian basin. We're missing a lot of these coastlines. Huge portions of what later will become things like the Sahara Desert and tropical parts of Africa are underwater. Antarctica, still connected to Australia during the Cretaceous, is temperate to semi-tropical forests. We have communities growing of plants here and up in Alaska even, that while it's more temperate, we still have big broadleaf forests in places like Northern Alaska and Antarctica. That's pretty cool. Now, the one kind of little sad bit to this is it's not just where different dinosaurs were, where different mammals were, that's going to sort of color our perception. We also have to bring in human experience. Where have most paleontologists been for the last 200 years? North America, we learned about Martian cope a little bit. Where else? England, really big one. The guy who named Dinosauria, British. Where else? We're gonna get there. China rapidly hits the scene in sort of the mid-1900s and is going to contribute to the popularity of dinosaurs today, but historically was not such a scientific powerhouse in studying dinosaurs. The rest of Europe was still a pretty big deal. So we have a lot of words like our Lagerstätten, our places where we have really good fossils, Germany. So if we have North America, England, parts of Europe, we can even kind of include China because, again, they're going to be really, really important. Unfairly, they have like all the coolest, best dinosaurs. What are we kind of missing about our story of dinosaurs? The entire southern hemisphere. I know you don't like this game, but name dinosaurs. What dinosaurs do you guys think of? T-Rex, North America. Another dinosaur? Brontosaurus, North America. Nodosaurus, North America. Velociraptor, woohoo, we got another continent. China, Asia. Like the comfy nap, I never remember how to say it. The one at the start of Jurassic Park that like eats, yes, North America. Any more dinosaurs? Sauropods are a broad group. That's good. That gets us actually out of North America. Because South America is going to be unbelievably dope for our sauropods. We've really only found that out in the last like 20 years. Africa, South America, India, Antarctica, Australia, all have dinosaur fossils. They're really cool. They're largely not part of our perception of what dinosaurs are, what our Mesozoic world is like. This will make a reappearance if we do this with Pleistocene animals, woolly mammoth, woolly rhino, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths. Okay, there's a few of those things that are South American invaders into North America, but generally we're looking at this little stripe of our sort of Western scientific portion of the world. So that's one of our biases we have to remember. Huge amount of it is just sort of the amount of press they got. You guys didn't name Stegosaurus, which hopefully is one of the more common ones. You can like picture what Stegosaurus looks like. We only have 11 specimens of Stegosaurus, like known. Not whole skeletons, although one of them is, but like 11 fossils that have been found that were like, this is Stegosaurus. It just so happens, though, that the British Museum collected the whole skeleton really early on in North America, displayed it in the British Museum, so everyone knows Stegosaurus, even though this is a really rare, unusual dinosaur. When we talked about dinosaurs on Wednesday, we talked about our sauropods, the big ones with the long necks. We talked about our armored dinosaurs, plates on the back, clubs, various cool things like that. We mostly talked about plant-eating dinosaurs. We even mentioned our duckbill dinosaurs with weird crests and things like that. Maybe arguably our most famous group, though, are going to be these theropods. So these are our primarily meat-eating dinosaurs. There's a few herbivores in here as well, but most of this group is going to be our meat-eating dinosaurs and the big famous things like T-Rex. Now, if we look at our phylogeny, so this is our branching tree of relatedness, here's our base of this tree, all of the things that we can unite together in a monophyletic group, one ancestor, all of the descendants for theropods. This is going to start in our late Triassic. So all but one of those Triassic dinosaurs we currently know about are theropods. They're up on two hind feet. They have meat-eating, pokey teeth. They have that special ankle joint. They're relatively sort of athletic looking, even if they aren't very big to start out with. We've got things like our Eoraptor in there, all really, really similar. In the Jurassic, we're going to start getting much bigger bodied dinosaurs and start getting some of these a little bit more interesting, unique groups. We're going to get things like another one I think most of you have probably heard of, Spinosaurus, big sail on its back. We'll get to that one. T-Rex, you've definitely heard of. Velociraptor, we had mentioned, and actually birds. Birds are dinosaurs. It's not like they come out of some little end. They are nested, haha, bird's nest, way high up in this tree of all of our different dinosaurs. There are dinosaurs younger than birds. Our birds are going to come all the way back well into the Jurassic. Hinting at some of the things that we can talk about for our dinosaur debate, this is the most charismatic and sort of most popular group of dinosaurs. This is going to result in quite a lot of sort of politics, drama within this area of science. Our big split between vertebrate paleontologists is, do you work on dinosaurs or do you work on anything else? And if you work on dinosaurs, it's mostly, do you work on fancy theropods? Do you work on other dinosaurs? There's some pretty serious drama that occurs. Probably our most famous, maybe even most well-known scientifically of all of our theropods is Tyrannosaurus rex. Tyrannosaurus is our genus, Rex is our species. So this is tyrant lizard. So saurus means lizard, tyranna, tyrant, Rex means king. Tyrant lizard king was the name given to Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is one of our more common fossils in a large swath of North America for the end of the Cretaceous. The day that the space rock smashes into Earth and is going to end our non-bird dinosaurs, this is the big critter of North American ecosystems, our apex predator, possibly even several of our other layers within that. There's a lot of different sizes of tyrannosaurids. They range from, I mean, this is still a large animal. This is a like sort of horse-sized carnivorous beast running around, which is scary when you put it that way, up to really, really big. Tyrannosaurids are in Asia. They're in North America. There's a few sort of similar things that get into South America. They're largely not in Africa and not so much in South America. And we'll get into a bit of why. T-Rex itself, though, North American, and even Western North American. If you go out in Montana, in Wyoming, in Utah, in Nebraska and the Dakotas, and look for dinosaur fossils, you will find T-Rex bones or teeth. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. That said, complete skeletons are extremely rare. Sue, the Tyrannosaurus Rex at the Chicago Field Museum, is currently our most complete Tyrannosaurus ever found, or I should say Tyrannosaurus Rex. She is about 85% complete, which is pretty darn good. There's a couple others. Scotty is about 80% complete, really, really close. We have a good idea of what this animal looked like. Dinosaurs have what we call indeterminate growth. They grew rather quickly to an adult size and then continue growing throughout their lives. So Sue is not quite the biggest, although Sue is very, very large, adult man for scale, giant murder bird. We have bits and pieces that hint that they got significantly even larger. We've also revised a lot of our sort of initial descriptions and ways we put many of these animals together. The oldest, earliest reconstructions, when T-Rex was named, have it really upright, dragging its tail along the ground. That would literally break its tail. It's not a very athletic or engaging sort of pose. We know it has its tail out, this sort of balance, given its skeletal structure, how muscle and tendons would have attached. It has pretty darn long legs. Arguably, maybe these two reconstructions should even be a bit fatter, the way Sue is. The thing that was really important with Sue is we found these stomach ribs. We were finally able to sort of connect the dots. That's a large, thick, with two C's, animal. Despite the rather reduced forearms, these are also arms that are still actually quite powerful. They have a lot of muscular attachments. It's not going to be grappling and wrestling prey down. Sue is our most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex. There is drama involved with the acquisition and discovery of Sue that has basically plagued dinosaur paleontology ever since. The specimen is named after the person, Sue, who found it, which is pretty cool. The catch is Sue was part of the Black Hills Institute, which is a private company that has a small museum and sells fossils. This is actually legal in the United States if the fossils are collected from private land. Vertebrate fossils are protected and seen as a public resource if they come from publicly owned federal land. So the Black Hills Institute went in to some areas with a lot of privately owned ranches in Montana and said, we will give you $2,500 if you sign this contract that we can look for fossils on your property and collect any fossils that we find. So this is what Sue originally looked like. Paleontology is often fairly hard. They put an enormous amount of work. So this was our hill slope edge here, excavating basically an entire hill slope with these huge articulated in life position portions of bone. There's Sue butt. Here is Sue's skull, sort of curled back. It's called the death pose. Skeleton sort of in articulation. They had to use helicopters to remove some of this huge blocks of rock from the field. And then there were hundreds of hours of preparation work put in at the museum to make a rather impressive skeleton. So this gets worse when they finally have it reasonably cleaned up and are like, hey, we found something really good. The landowner is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. When you gave me $2,500, I thought you were finding like crappy pieces of bones, not like a whole T-Rex skeleton. He demanded it back. Black Hills Institute was like, you signed this piece of paper saying we could do this. At this point, this got enough publicity that the tribe that the landowner belonged to was like, hey, actually, you remember that part where you signed over the mineral rights on your land to the tribe so that you wouldn't have to pay private property taxes on it? Technically, you didn't have the right to sign a contract that people could go collect fossils on your land. So this becomes a extremely messy court case with the Black Hills Institute, the landowner, the tribe, and some involvement from the US federal government trying to figure out where this should go. It was awarded to the landowner with no no payment given to the Black Hills Institute, other than that they were able to cast many of the bones and make a copy, before they had to give Sue back. The landowner then had it put up for auction, and Sue sold for $6 million. Sue was purchased by McDonald's and donated to the Chicago Field Museum, which, yay, Sue ended up in a museum. There are little golden arches in some of the corners of this amazing exhibit that Sue is in. And one of the really big problems of this outcome, besides all of the weird legal drama of all of that, is suddenly dinosaurs were worth a whole bunch of money. 2 weeks ago, a very controversial T-Rex skeleton that is a lot less complete and possibly had some illegally included casts of Sue shoved into the skeleton to make it look more complete, just sold for $19 million in auction. 19 million. This is the 5th T-Rex skeleton that has come up for auction now since Sue. Most of these have been sold into private hands and have not appeared in museums. Yeah. One of them is believed to have been sold to a Saudi prince, although I don't think it has been fully verified that that was the case. Not only did this create this huge demand, a lot of landowners were like, oh, hey, you know how I said you could go look for fossils on my land? Yeah, I'm taking that back, because they thought they could sell, janky, ugly dinosaur bones for a really lot of money. But this has also really fueled this very politically and ethically contentious sale of fossils. Many countries ban the export of fossils from their country to other countries. The US does not. Again, vertebrate fossils on federal land are protected under federal law. It is a felony to collect or destroy fossils on federal land, vertebrate fossils, without collection permits. They belong to all people. However, we also have a lot of private land in the United States, and if you collect fossils there, you can sell them and do whatever you want with them. I don't necessarily think that is bad or good, but it is often fairly hard to enforce. If you are working on a ranch that is sort of close to the Black Hills, which has an enormous amount of both tribal land and federal land, it can be hard to document exactly where something came from. So we likely have a fairly large poaching system established in the United States, which is quite profitable. Again, much controversy surrounding this. Let's continue on with controversial dinosaurs. Spinosaurus. The only thing in recent publications that has surpassed T-Rex in drama has been Spinosaurus. This is a really weird dinosaur. By mass, T-Rex is really, really, really thick. It's a larger theropod meat-eating dinosaur. In terms of length, height, this one's bigger. So this is, by some metrics, our largest theropod dinosaur. In the sort of 3 versions of reconstructions, what kind of differences do you notice? Sometimes they don't have a dip. Was it a complete round one? That's a great question. We're not entirely sure. When I first started teaching this class, the red bones were the only ones we actually had of Spinosaurus. We've added in most of a jaw, a little bit more sail material, and a complete tail, which is pretty darn cool. We're still missing most of the front limbs. It would be really nice to have better skull material. It'd be really nice to have a more complete sail. So we have differences in the sail. This reconstruction kind of on 4 feet. This reconstruction on 2 feet. How balanced does this look? How balanced does this one look? We have just enough arm bits to know that the arms are a lot smaller than the hind limbs. But the hind limbs, we have a complete pelvis, are not super long, and they're like quite far back on the body. So one of the big hypotheses is maybe this is aquatic. It's got weird teeth. It's got long, spiky, spine-shaped teeth, which is really good for piercing and holding on to things like fish. The catch is, like, how great a swimmer does this thing look like? Honestly, not great. The better tail we found, it looks like maybe it has a little bit more paddly tail. That kind of helps, but like, it still isn't fantastic. One of the people we will hopefully have as a guest on Wednesday recently wrote a paper that was like, this is not a swimming animal. This might be a wading animal, like a heron, that sort of wades around and snaps up fishies. I personally think that might be a little more accurate, but there's plenty of people who still think that it's a swimming critter. Okay, so not a super common fossil. This is coming out of Africa. We do have some related ones coming out of South America. Again, Africa not super well studied for the most part. And a lot of Africa was just not depositing rocks quite as well during the time period. The dinosaurs aren't quite as common there. The type specimen, the original one used to describe a species and say, this is what it is, you have to compare every other one to it, is this. How old does this photograph look? Old. This is a early 1900s photograph. We have this beautiful jaw, we have some upper teeth, we have a little tiny bit of skull. We have just enough vertebrae to be like, wow, this thing has these giant processes sticking off the top of its vertebrae. They would have had to have been some sort of sail back thing. The divot put in these sails is because there sort of appears to be a divot between them. Yep, they're pretty broken. It's maybe not the best interpretation. You can, see they're getting towards the edge, but there's a slightly bigger problem now. There's no more recent pictures of this because the specimen doesn't exist anymore. This was in a museum in Germany. What happened to a lot of Germany in World War II? Like, regardless what you're thinking about with war and blah, 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 it sucks when, like, history gets blown up. So type specimen used to name Spinosaurus, gone. This is a problem because we have not fantastic photos as basically our point for what this animal was. Some of this material is getting better. Again, there have been some very recent new discoveries of some new Spinosaurus material. We still don't have a real complete skeleton. I think the next 5 years we'll probably have 12 more papers on, like, what did Spinosaurus look like? How many legs was it walking on? Could it swim, or would it have, like, tipped over belly up if it was actually swimming? There's a lot of controversy about Spinosaurus. One of our cooler groups of dinosaurs within theropods are called dromaeosaurs. This includes our famous things like Velociraptor. If you have seen Jurassic Park or Jurassic Worlds, how big are the Velociraptors in the movies? Yeah, like Blue's like this big, running along next to the motorbike. Yeah, so if Velociraptor was standing on the table, it's like this tall. Without its tail, it's like that long. Tail adds a bit more onto it. It's like turkey sized. It's still fucking terrifying though, because what's that? That is a giant murder claw. Animals that have a similar style claw today, similar, we don't have anything exactly like that, often use this for disemboweling their prey that is larger than them. If you jump on something with feet like that and rip your feet down, all of the guts come out and your prey dies and you eat them. We also have some evidence of some of this group of dromaeosaurs, many of which aren't that big, of hunting in packs. This is something that Jurassic Park got right. There are larger dinosaur herbivore fossils with teeth marks and shed teeth because they kept regrowing new teeth from multiple different individuals. There's also really cool things like Utahraptor, which was discovered right before the original Jurassic Park came out. And Steven Spielberg was like, ooh, this one's cool because this one actually is this big. But Velociraptor has a cooler sounding name, so we're going to call it Velociraptor and just use Utahraptor. We have a block with a couple dozen Utahraptors. It looks like a family unit. They got stuck in quicksand. So more evidence of these groups working together, hunting, quite smart. How do these reconstructions differ from our movies, though? They're covered in feathers. We have Velociraptor fossils from China, Inner Mongolia, that preserve all the soft tissue. These are not just like kind of feathered, these are really, really feathered. They can't fly, but they're getting pretty darn close to our birdie things, and they're very, very feathered. They're going to have some odd cousins, though. You remember I said theropods are mostly meat-eating dinosaurs. So here's our weirdo exception. Therizinosaurus, possibly my favorite extinct dinosaur, because they're just weird. When we first found this group, this was a paleontologist named Roy Chapman Andrews, who was British and spent a lot of time going to Mongolia to collect fossils and bring them back. Mongolia doesn't allow that anymore. Mongolian fossils cannot leave Mongolia legally. What he found was this pair of arms. Complete arms. Those are really big arms. Not only are they gigantic, powerful arms, the claws on the end of these are enormous. Think of if you've ever had to trim a kitty or puppy set of claws. They have the bone on the way inside, there's the quick, that's the blood around it, and then they have a lot of nail around the outside of it. You can trim that back because that's not the part with the bone and the blood around it. So this is just the bone part. You'd have to put a giant keratin fingernail material claw over the top of that. So this is basically like Edward Scissorhands as a dinosaur, a big dinosaur. The structure of the hands was very similar to some of the other theropod dinosaurs, minus the giant claw parts. So they were like, wow, we have found this huge meat-eating dinosaur with mega slashy claws. How cool. This is the original first one that these arms go to. They later found the head. The head is tiny, comparatively, and it kind of has a beak on the end and like little tiny leaf-shaped grinding teeth. This is an herbivore. This is not a predator. Why does it have giant claws? it maybe is grabbing trees and hooking them down, or like slashing brush down and eating all of it. Maybe it's protection against other things that want to eat it. Because it evolved from meat-eating dinosaurs, though, it's not quite as sort of set up for plants as some of the other plant-eating dinosaurs we talked about. So they also have to have these truly enormous giant bodies, likely for fermenting all of the plant material that they ate. Pretty darn weird. So they have giant, like, fat chicken bodies. Some of them have a hump in the middle of their back too, because why not? With huge giant arms with giant claws and like weird little heads. Strange. Okay. Yay! We did our non-birdie dinosaurs. Now we're going to mention some plants and mammals before we get to our birds. This is a really important period in plants. Like, again, maybe we shouldn't call it Age of Dinosaurs, Age of Reptiles. We should call this the dawn of flowers, or the age of conifers. Our plants that have tissue able to transport nutrients around, our seed plants, this is all happening in our Paleozoic, so many of these splits are happening earlier. But our huge amount of diversification of many of these cone-bearing seeded plants is really going to happen within our Mesozoic. And then our super important branch way up, now pushed back maybe a little bit into the Jurassic, between all of our angiosperms, our flowering plants. The majority of the plants you all gathered for the plant lab, flowering plants, all of our grasses, all of our deciduous trees, all of our shrubby bushes we have outside, these are all angiosperms. And they're the sort of last part of this story. Most of our Mesozoic period, we're going to have plants like ginkgos and ferns and cycads and conifers making up our forests and ecosystems. This is something that is kind of often ignored in paleo art. Good paleo art doesn't, but our plant communities are going to look very, very different than when we look outside today, and the vast majority of our plants and many of our entire ecosystems. So the entire eastern seaboard dominated by deciduous plants or deciduous trees, all grasslands. None of those ecosystems exist in our Mesozoic. I mentioned a few of our delightful Triassic weirdos, but it's not just the plants that are getting their start during this time period. Our earliest snakes are going to show up in the late Triassic and really take off in the Jurassic. Our first lizards show up in the Triassic. They make it through our end Triassic mass extinction, really start to diversify. We have things that look like modern lizards by the time we are in the Jurassic. Our amphibians, they had their heyday, but now we're going to get things like frogs. Frogs show up in the Jurassic. Frogs even get kind of scary in the Cretaceous. There is a frog called Beelzebub bufo. So like giant devil frog is basically how it translates. That is a bullfrog-like frog, except for it's about this big around. It's like a mega frog. Also, we're pretty sure it ate small dinosaurs. A frog eating dinosaurs. That's cool. We have enough of these diversities for our different ecosystems that instead of paleontology just often being sort of stamp collecting, we can start to think about our interactions between all of these organisms. These are pulled from two different papers for our Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous of particular sites, thinking about here's all of our fossils found, what might have been eating what? Some things might have been eating fish and tiny mammals and lizards, and in turn being eaten by bigger dinosaurs. Fish are a bigger deal here. I like this one in that they brought in a lot of the plants. We have tree ferns, conifers, cycads, some early flowers, because this is the Cretaceous, ferns. We have insects eating many of these plants. We have mammals eating plants and insects. We have some smaller dinosaurs that were eating probably a combination of plants and bugs and mammals. Omnivores were a thing now. We have pure plant-eating dinosaurs like Triceratops, Ankylosaurus. We have pure meat-eating dinosaurs like some of our little raptors, and really big meat-eating dinosaurs that were definitely only eating meat. So we can start to think beyond just this is what this animal was, but how did this animal not only interact with its environment, but with other plants and animals within its environment? Our mammals are also really taking off. This is a slice of, here's our Jurassic, here's our early Cretaceous, and here's equivalents for today. Most of our Mesozoic mammals aren't super big, but they actually get bigger than we kind of previously gave them credit for. The story, if you even ever heard of mammals in the age of dinosaurs, is like that one on the first slide. They're like, hello, I am a tiny little rat thing, and I am the popcorn the dinosaurs dine upon, and I am inferior until the dinosaurs are killed by space rocks. They're not going to be giant. We don't have things like elephants running around, but we're getting like medium large dog sized mammals running around during this time period. And ecologically, they're already really, really diverse, even in the Jurassic. We have things that have evidence of having climbing ability and things like prehensile tails. That's pretty cool if you're hanging out in a tree to be able to really climb well, hang out in a tree. How well do you think most dinosaurs were at climbing? Not great. So here's some really cool ecosystems that mammals can use that dinosaurs aren't using as much. We have definitely aquatic mammals in the Jurassic, things with flattened tails like beavers that they could have been using to swim. We have footprints of webbed feet of little mammals running around during this time period. Other than maybe Spinosaurus, our dinosaurs aren't swimming. Granted, we have scary Mesozoic marine reptiles that aren't dinosaurs, but like freshwater, those mostly aren't in. Freshwater might be a pretty good habitat for mammals to do a lot of cool things. We have some stuff that look like generalists, something like the raccoon of the Mesozoic. It's got sharp teeth, it's got crushing teeth, it can eat anything and kind of do anything. That's cool. We have digging and burrowing mammals in the Jurassic, things with powerful front limbs that are sort of mole-like that could be living almost entirely subterraneanly. Probably not another ecosystem dinosaurs are doing. We have ones that have really long legs compared to their body size. If you're going to be running around on the surface, you probably better be pretty fast to outrun all the dinosaurs that admittedly do want to eat you. And finally, we even have evidence of gliding mammals. Not flying yet, but gliding. Things like flying squirrels, basically, of the Mesozoic. So ways to get between our trees, above the heads of your dinosaurs so they can't eat you. Mammals are a lot more diverse than we previously thought. Great question. Quite probably. So sugar gliders are marsupials. They are pouch mammals. We are placental mammals. That's a big split in mammals. That happens somewhere around our Jurassic, early Cretaceous. So some of these might kind of go more one way or the other in what they're most equivalent to. This Volocotherium, I think is its name. I don't have that quite right. It looks very possum-y in its teeth. So it's probably a sort of proto-marsupial, maybe related to sugar gliders. Distant grandma. Most of these animals are small. This also makes it a little harder to find the fossils unless you're going out looking for them. If I wander around Montana, I can find chunks of dinosaur bone. It's hard to miss once you vaguely know what you're looking for because it's big. I'm not going to be able to walk by something's jaw that is this long if I'm not looking for it and have any hope of finding it. A lot of these animals are also mostly known from teeth. Teeth are 98% mineral. You don't have to do a lot to make them turn into a fossil. Bones are only about 75% mineral. It's a little bit harder, they're a little bit more fragile. They don't always show up in the fossil record as much. So a lot of our Mesozoic mammals, people are taking screens, running sediment through them, washing them, getting little bits out, and we're left with just teeth. This is a very active area of research. One of the best labs in the world for this is up at University of Washington. So Pacific Northwest, a lot of research going on these guys. We can trace this lineage back even to our Paleozoic. Our synapsids, so those differences in our skull structure, are things like our cynodonts, those things that survived the end Permian mass extinction, that look like potatoes with little tusks, not maybe the most charismatic. There are likely ancestors of all of this diversification of mammals. We get these kind of early groups of mammals splitting off in these different groups. We finally get what we somewhat arbitrarily define as our monophyletic group containing all mammals that we have today by the late Triassic. True mammals show up in our late Triassic. Were any of you taught in biology what a mammal is? Or what were you taught in biology for what a mammal is? Gives live birth and produces milk. How can we test that in the fossil record? Like, basically we can't. Oh, but huzzah! There is a skeletal characteristic that unites all mammals. They just don't teach you about it in biology because it sounds a lot less cool and it's actually harder to see on things alive today. We have 3 little tiny bones in our ears. And basically everything outside of mammals, 2 of those are attached to their jaw. Mammals pop those bones off the back of their jaw, shove them into their ears, having these 3 little bones that sort of relate to each other in different ways. Vibrate means we not only have really, really good hearing, we have good directional and 360-degree hearing. There are other things that have good hearing. Some birds have very good hearing, but mammals honestly do it best. This is one of the sort of good aspects that lets mammals maybe do very well. You can hear things like ground vibration as the dinosaur that wants to eat you is coming along. Probably things like hair, live birth, milk producing are all part of this. Some of those traits may have shown up even earlier though. So pretty cool, weird little things. Ooh, great one. So platypuses and echidnas, our monotremes, they're egg-laying mammals. That's super weird. They are mammals though. So they are within this group and excellent chance to get out one of my favorite 3D prints. They look shockingly like they did back in the Cretaceous. This is a 3D print of a skull of a Cretaceous platypus. The only difference is it's bigger. The platypuses are actually tiny. The ones alive today, from like tip to tail, are only about this big. This is wild. This guy would have been about this big, so a little bit bigger. And he still has some tiny little nub teeth, are ones today no longer have any teeth. Y'all should pass that around. He's pretty cool. They appear to be maybe a little more common in our late Cretaceous than they are today, but hey, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, apparently. Finishing up some of our dinosaur stuff, another person that hopefully can come and stay is my friend Ashley, and he recently published a paper about 1.5 years ago using a whole bunch of statistics. We're really starting to delve into not just Here is a fossil. Next. How did these organisms interact with their environment and each other over time? So this is looking at estimating, given the number of fossils we find of T-Rex and the age of the rocks we find those fossils in, how many T-Rexes ever existed. The estimate is about 2.5 billion T-Rexes existed through geologic time. And at any given time in North America, there are probably about 20,000 T-Rexes. Sure, there's lots of animals we have way more of today at any given time in North America, but not giant predators, like really, really giant predators. Imagine if you blew up a grizzly bear to the size of an elephant and you had 20,000 of those running around. People would be very concerned. Another possibility for papers, there have been some controversial takes on parts of this. For more controversy, for paper topics, if you do not have a topic for Wednesday, are things like this particular chunk of amber. Not only is this Myanmar amber, making it blood amber, it was published by a fairly prominent paleontologist at University of Chicago as a bird. The catch is, after it was published and other people looked at it, it's a lizard. They had to retract this paper. That's a pretty big deal in science when it's not just like, oh, haha, you're kind of wrong. I'm going to write a paper on why I think you're wrong. When you have to retract your paper, it's like, you done fuck up. Another older debate that is still not settled is we have Triceratops, we have Torosaurus. Some people think that this is just growth stages. They keep growing throughout their lives. Other people think they're definitely different things. I think they're probably different things, but I think that there's room for debate and discussion on that. Okay, now I have 14 minutes to cover all of birds. That's actually a lot, because the phylogeny of birds is so redonkulous that, like, I can't even fit it split in two into a graphic that you can like read any of this projected on the board. And this is a time scale. This first band here, where these first branches of these different groups of birds we have today is coming out of, is happening in our Mesozoic, like quite a ways back into our Mesozoic. Both these branches occur there. Birds are stupid diverse. We have so many birds today that this just blows the water, or blows mammals out of the water in terms of number of organisms, number of species, diversity within individual ecosystems. Birds are incredible. Back to that issue with our how we describe phylogenetic relationships, though. Order, so species, genus, family, these are all different families of birds, the different colors. Order aves, birds. Dinosauria is also an order. Even though we have order aves, then we have theropod dinosaurs, then we have birds coming out of the end of it. This is an issue that basically everyone's been like, oh, well, mistakes were made. How do you fix this? How do you condense this level of diversity down? Probably you don't. And it's kind of highlighting another one of our problems with our Linnaean taxonomy system. So this way of categorizing and organizing life. It's useful for thinking about how things are related. It's maybe not so great actually showing off diversity because of problems like this. If we zoom in At this base of the phylogeny for birds, these splits well back in the Cretaceous. So here's our end Cretaceous. Our oldest three groups of birds are some pretty weird things that include our like nighthawks and nightjars. We get these here in the evening in Oregon in summer. But these two oldest groups are our chickens and ducks and geese, and our things like ostriches. That one kind of makes sense. You can look at that and be like, yeah, that's pretty dinosaur-y like. So these are groups that quite literally show up in the Mesozoic that we still have all over the place today. Here is a simplified phylogeny. So here is our archosaurs. This includes crocodiles, our pterosaurs, although we're a little unsure of the order those go, but just outside of dinosaurs. Within our dinosaurs, we have our split to our bird-hipped dinosaurs, which is most of our herbivores and does not include birds, and our lizard hip, which includes our big sauropods and our theropods and birds, confusingly. If we zoom in on just our theropods, again, way up the branches is actually where birds are coming out of. We have some of our raptor-like ones as our sort of next closest relatives or sister grouping to birds. So something like Velociraptor, not a direct ancestor of birds, but a very close cousin. T-Rex is actually a little bit farther back, even though this is one of our last living non-bird dinosaurs. Back to more controversy with some of our weird finds and things like this is another Therizinosaurus hand. That's about actually life size too. The way it's projected, these are really, really big claws. Roy Chapman Andrews, for once we can have somebody other than a US paleontologist who is doing shady things. He's British. He was one of the sort of OG, let's go to a bunch of other countries and take their fossils paleontologists. You can make a lot of arguments that this was just sort of what you did at the time, that the fossils were not being collected and not being studied and would have eroded away and been lost to everyone had they not been collected. It's still bringing up a whole nother can of worms. He did discover things like the first ever fossil dinosaur nests. So these are dinosaur eggs. Notice they're very crackled and broken on the surface. If you find something that's totally round or oval, it's definitely not a dinosaur egg. Actual dinosaur eggs are like crunched up and sort of smushed. I mean, how many of you had to do the like elementary school or middle school science project where you made something to protect an egg and had to like chuck it off of a building? Few nods. It's kind of hard. Eggs are pretty good at breaking. They don't fossilize super well. So finding nests is a pretty big deal. This made us start to think a little bit more about how dinosaurs worked, rather than just these mysterious beasts. Roy Chapman Andrews was also interesting in that he didn't believe in extinction. So he thought there had to be dinosaurs somewhere. He organized several expeditions to jungly parts of Africa, and one of his big goals was to find dinosaurs. People also looked in South America. Going to sort of happier paleontologists, just sort of glancing at more of these honor lines to birds. Gabriel Ukiyoto is one of our maybe premier paleo artists. He's really sort of brought this to our attention that so many of these dinosaurs are so much more feathered than previously interpreted. We started finding really feathered dinosaur fossils in China in kind of the 1950s. And this changed our book on what dinosaurs were like and that birds were maybe dinosaurs. Jim Kirkland is the state paleontologist for Utah and is running a project mostly via crowdfunding called the Utah Raptor Project. He's been successful enough that there is now a Utah Raptor State Park in Utah where they found a block that's about from the wall to here round with about 20 Utah raptors in it, including young and old ones. They think, and a hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur. They think the duck-billed dinosaur got trapped in quicksand. The family of Utah raptors was like, score, dinner, and then all got stuck in the quicksand. Okay, how do birds differ from T-Rex? I like to call T-Rex a giant murder chicken. They actually do have a fair amount of differences. Pneumasticity, weird word. Anyone know what that means? It has to do with airspace, hollow bones. If you're gonna fly, you gotta lighten the load. T-Rex, big, thick, chunky, dinosaur bones, pretty solid. You gotta have light bones, but they still have to be really strong. So if you look at the inside of a chicken wing bone, if you eat meat and eat chicken wings, break one in half next time. It's mostly open space with bone marrow in it with some kind of little struts, sort of like a bridge. So really light, but still very strong. Birds evolved powered flight. Some of them later give it up, like our ostriches and our penguins. Birds are all endothermic. They produce their own heat. Ooh, here's another dinosaur debate topic. We're not so sure if, when, where, how many of our dinosaurs were endothermic. Stuff like sauropods, probably not endothermic. You don't want to generate much heat if you are that big, or you will cook yourself to death. Birds have beaks, although I put a question mark on that one because some of our early birds are still going to have things like teeth, just to be slightly scarier. Birds also have a specialized bone that is lacking in the rest of dinosaurs called a furcula. Anyone ever heard of a furcula? Nope, probably not. Anyone heard of a wishbone? That's a furcula. So the little bone that comes off of your turkey that our superstition says you can break in half and whoever gets the bigger part has good luck. This connects the keel to the basically arm bones. So if you are flapping your wings, this is where your muscle attachment is. This provides stability for flying. If you're gonna fly, it's mostly gonna be better to be small. There's a few things that give up on flying to go back to being big. You're gonna need a lot of feathers, and the feathers have to be a bit special. Instead of just covering you with fluff, we have to have large feathers that can generate lift when you move them, as well as smaller feathers that sort of support and give structure to this wing. So these different types of feathers are found throughout everything with wings today, even things with very, very reduced wings. And this is going to be very characteristic of birds, although a few of these boxes are also checked by things like our raptors. So how do you get flight? This huge innovation. Well, we have two main hypotheses. Once folks started to realize, there's a whole bunch of things that are sort of half dino, half bird. Birds are probably dinosaurs. One idea, cleverly named, ground up. You have little dinosaurs running around, jumping up to try and catch bugs. If you jump up to catch a bug and flap your arms and get a tiny bit more lift, stay airborne slightly longer, eventually over time, maybe the ones that can flap the best, catch the most bugs, have the most nutrients, have the most offspring, and eventually you end up with flying. The other option is trees down. We start out as gliders. we have gliding mammals in the Mesozoic. So maybe you just scramble up in a tree, yeet yourself into space, and the more wings you have, the more it sort of slows down your plummet to the ground. Enter a third hypothesis, where wing-assisted incline running is something that was discovered or suggested about 15 years ago. And I have a video I'll post of this later, but in many young birds in these really base of our bird family tree, like turkeys and some of these kind of pheasants and quails, the baby ones can't fly yet, but they still need to get away from predators. They use their wings to basically create a airfoil to keep them on even above vertical surfaces so that they can run up walls. A lot of birds do this today. Maybe wings started out as a way to run up the trees, and then later, as these muscles became more and more powerful and our feathers got bigger, this may have led to flying. And there is a group of researchers that are doing a ton of work on this. And this is probably our most probable scenario for how flight started. Now, our question is for making a monophyletic group is, where does it start? What is the oldest bird? Had I assigned you a traditional historical geology textbook, out of the options out there, about half of them are going to call Archaeopteryx, which we have a beautiful cast of one of the original skeletons over here, the first bird. It's pretty cool, but it's got some in-between characteristics. It's from our Jurassic. It still has this long tailbone. Birds don't have big long tailbones, they just have tail feathers. It doesn't have a beak, it still has teeth. It's got big claws sticking off the edge of its wings, but it has true wings. It probably could fly. It's pretty birdie looking. I don't know. I don't have a bird in the fight on this one. I don't have a problem with calling Archaeopteryx a bird, especially because pretty darn quickly we're going to get progressively more and more bird-like. We're still in the late Jurassic. These are some of these incredible fossils coming out of China. These are wing feathers and leg feathers, which is a little interesting on this particular bird. Starting to even get some kind of odd, decorative, special feathers. Still have claws, still have teeth. Birds are even going to invent cool, weird things like being wildly sexually dimorphic, males and females looking different. By the time we get to the early Cretaceous, birds have lost the big bone in their tail. They've lost, for the most part, most of the claws, although they still have a single sort of thumb claw sticking off of their wings, and they still have sharp teeth and not really a beak, but like pretty birdy. And these are really, really cool, amazing fossils coming pretty much entirely out of China. So it's where China really makes it big with paleontology, is feathers. Having things like sexual dimorphism is cool because it's something about social interaction and maybe even implies some stuff about parental care. By the time we are early Cretaceous, we have pretty much all of our characteristics of birds. We've lost our claws, we have great wings, we have just a little nub for your tail. The only thing that it's going to take a while for birds to finally fix is teeth. Even some of our early Cenozoic birds are still going to have some teeth. And on that delightful, scary note, I think I'm slightly over time. That is a horrible question. The oldest known bat fossil is Paleocene. It looks like a bat. It's flying, and even worse, it's already echolocating. So it's a functionally modern bat. So when did bats evolve? Probably in the Mesozoic. but we don't have fossils of them. How bats evolved flying? Maybe one of the groups we have the least idea of where they come from. We're not even super sure what they're all that related to.